Hello, welcome to Canada Files. I'm Jim Deeks. Our guest on this edition is Peter Mansbridge, who 2 years after his retirement is still one of the most recognized faces in all of Canada. Peter spent 49 years with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the last 29 of those years as chief correspondent and primary anchor of the CBC National News. He was as respected and as admired by Canadians as Walter Cronkite and Tom Brokaw were by Americans during their careers. We sat down in Toronto recently with Peter Mansbridge for a good discussion on his life, career, and being Canadian. Peter, before we go back in time, let's start with your perspective today on the career that you've had. 29 years as the face of the CBC National News. Given the changes that we've seen in television news and journalism in general over the last 10 years or so, do you think it's possible for anyone to have the same kind of career opportunity that you had?
Listen, I was very lucky. You know, I was lucky the way I started. I was lucky with the people I work with. And I was lucky with the times. I mean, times have changed. Times have changed specifically in the way consumers get their news, how they want to get it. You know, these things have changed our world.
Have they ever?
And it's had a huge impact on television ratings. So in a way, I was kind of lucky in the time period that I was in, because the challenges right now are considerable. Doesn't mean they can't be met, but they're considerable.
Being one of the most recognized faces in Canada for 3 decades, basically, some might think of it as a huge honor. Others might think of it as God, what a horrible burden, or even a curse. How did you think of it?
Never as a burden. I mean, it was always a treat. I mean, occasionally you'd have people angry at you, and that would, you know, take forms through emails, or in the old days through mail, or sometimes even on the street. But that was rare. I mean, it was an honor for me to be in the role that I was in, travel the country and the world as a representative of Canadian television and Canada. So I never considered it a burden.
What about today? 2 years into retirement, you must get tired of having to say hello and be nice to people when you're just trying to go out and have a pizza some night.
Yeah. You know, my wife is an actor. She's kind of known for what she's done on television as well. Sure. So we do have still, you know, people kind of come up to us and want to say hello. But that too is not a burden. Canadians are pretty friendly. They know when to talk to you and when to leave you alone. And for the most part, they leave you alone.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning of your career, because it's a story that I think a lot of Canadian viewers probably already know, but certainly a lot of our American viewers wouldn't know the story of how you got your start. And it's very much like the old yarn about Lana Turner at Schwab's drugstore sipping a soda and gets, you know, discovered by a producer. Tell us where you were and what happened.
Well, first of all, I never finished high school, so I never went to university. It was the 1960s, sort of the mid-60s, and I was kind of having fun. I was traveling around the country in the carefree way that we used to do things in the 1960s. But at a certain point, money runs out, and you can't call on your parents anymore. You got to actually get a job.
Terrible when that happens.
Yeah, terrible. So I ended up working for a small airline in northern Manitoba, an airline called Transair at Churchill, Manitoba. So it's right on Hudson Bay. And, you know, for Americans who are watching, you look at a map, you see Hudson Bay up there. It's, you know, it's well on its way into the Arctic. So Churchill was right there. And it was kind of the gateway to the Arctic for supplying by air. So I was working in there, for the most part, running the freight operation, 19 years old. One day, the ticket agents were kind of overwhelmed at the counter, and they asked me to announce the flight over the PA system. So I did. You know, Transair Flight 106, Thompson to Pawn, Winnipeg, now ready for boarding at Gate 1. We only had one gate at Churchill, a small airport. But anyway, everybody went rushing off to the gate except one guy who came over and he said, "Hey, I'm the manager of the local CBC Northern Service radio station, and I'm looking for someone to do the late night news. I can't find anybody who's interested." Not the late night news, late night music show.
Sure.
And he said, "Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I'd love it." I'd never thought about broadcasting, never crossed my mind. Next day I started. So that tells you a little bit about what the 1960s was like in the hiring process in broadcasting.
For sure.
And I got in, and I was there for almost 50 years in the CBC, starting in that spot.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Your
You try
parents-
to explain that in a journalism
Oh, it
class
just
at
couldn't
university,
possibly
and the
happen
kids
today.
want to riot, right?
Exactly. It couldn't happen today.